I think a lot of women are intimidated generally by finances, right? So I will not lie and say I wasn't intimidated. But one thing that I've built over the years is the confidence that I know how to learn. It's just getting started. I think that's the hard part, and getting over the idea that it's some big, complicated monster.
I don't know. I just don't know math, so I can't do money. And it's like, that is such a small part of it. I have to let you in on a secret. The math of it's not that big of a deal. You're listening to Everyone's Talking Money, the show that's all about making life richer. Whether you're here to crush debt, build wealth, or finally feel in control of your cash, you are in the right place. My guest today, Elizabeth Ayoola, totally gets it. She's a finance writer, expert, and co-host of NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast. But before that, she was a brand new mom making $8 an article, writing 10 stories a day just to scrape by. That hustle led to a realization. Financial freedom isn't about mastering spreadsheets. It's about understanding yourself. Today, Elizabeth and I are digging into how she went from paycheck panic to financial peace, why mindset, not math, is the real key to wealth, and how AI is reshaping the way we all learn, earn, and spend. And before we dive in, if you love these kinds of honest, judgment-free money conversations, make sure you're on my email list. That's where I send out the deeper takeaways from episodes like this one, plus real life money strategies you won't hear anywhere else. I'll put the sign up link in the show notes. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Elizabeth Ayoola. Elizabeth, you've built a unique career. Writer, finance expert, and now co-host of NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast. But before all of that, you started this journey wanting to learn how to achieve financial freedom for yourself. Can you take us back to that moment, and what was that moment to say, I need to figure this stuff out first?
Yeah, wow, time flies. Okay, so we're going to rewind to maybe about 7, 8, almost 10 years ago. Let's just put it at a decade. I was pregnant with my first child. I'm a mom of one. I was a freelance writer at the time, and I was earning like $8 per article. So I was writing at least 10 articles a day in order to make a decent living. And I thought to myself, something has to change because I had a newborn baby. I was writing around the clock and I just wasn't earning enough money. So that's when I started looking into how I can create financial stability for myself, one. And I think on the second half of that, I studied social policy. So I learned a lot about how society works, poverty, and it always had me curious about how do we get out of this capitalistic rat race? And financial freedom seemed to be one of the only ways. So I think what propelled me forward into taking it seriously was having a child. And I just started doing a lot of reading of my own. And then eventually, I was like, well, since I spend most of my day working, why don't I find a job in personal finance where I can learn about money while I'm also working? So that's eventually how I got into the finance space.
And as you got into the finance space and you're researching and you're learning, did you start to immediately implement different habits? Were you still in that same position where you were making the $8 per article? What what was the transition for you like?
I love that. I don't know that it was one pivotal moment. It was a lot of little things. So small steps and small habit changes. So I started with saving more, right? Putting away more money, making sure that I was saving more than I was spending. And then I kind of reverse engineered and said, well, how much money do I need to live comfortably? At this point, I'm not even thinking about retirement or anything, just how much I need to earn. So I started researching jobs that basically would give me the income that I needed and seeing how I could up level my skills kind of to get there. I think a huge one for me as well, once I realized, okay, well, this is the amount that I need to live comfortably, was learning to negotiate the kind of salaries that I think I needed and deserved. And that was a process. But I will say, in terms of behavior changes, those are more recent. And actually, if I had to choose a pivotal moment, it would be when I started looking at my financial traumas and my money values and my behaviors around money and kind of addressing the shame I felt, not feeling worthy of earning a lot of money, that things really changed for me. Because I think the truth is that sometimes you can do all the right things, but if you're not earning enough money, it just doesn't really move the needle.
I think it's great. A lot of people that are in finance stumbled upon it. And there's also not a lot of women in finance also. Did that even occur to you? Like, I am way outnumbered. My college education is not in this. Like, did that feel intimidating by you? Or did you just like go into it going, you know what? I'm noticing a lot of the emotional sides of it and playing towards that element of finance because that affects everyone.
It does, and absolutely. So I went into it. I think a lot of women are intimidated generally by finances, right? So I will not lie and say I wasn't intimidated. But one thing that I've built over the years is the confidence that I know how to learn. And no matter how complex or big a topic is, as long as you know how to learn, you break it down and learn it in the way that feels best for you. So I think I was patient with myself. I was aggressive. I asked a lot of questions. I did a lot of reading, a lot of research. And I think with time, it just begins to click. And also, I think one of the biggest things that I learned working in finance is, it seems intimidating, but once you get in it, it really is not the fundamentals, at least, that difficult. It's just getting started. I think that's the hard part and getting over the idea that it's some big, complicated monster.
Well, I'm not good at math. I don't know. I just don't know math, so I can't do money. And it's like, that is such a small part of it.
It is. Yeah.
It's like, I have to let you in on a secret. The math of it's not that big of a deal. It's
No,
more the emotions and the junk that we carry with it. That's what makes money hard for most
absolutely.
people.
Yeah, my co-host jokes, he's a certified financial planner, that, most of their job is being a therapist, right? So I think that's the biggest part of it, understanding people's values, their fears, their triggers. I think once you can get a handle on that, the numbers part gets a bit easier.
Absolutely. So on your podcast, you have your thumb on the trends of what's going on, what people are thinking with money, questions they have. So what's coming up a lot? What are you seeing on your show?
Well, there are several things, especially with how the current economy is moving. So we are actually getting a lots of questions from listeners around housing. Is this a good time to buy a house? Around cars, especially because of tariffs. And lots of stuff around budgeting, actually. So, financial priorities, where should I focus my attention? How do I manage unexpected expenses? So, we're actually getting a lot of budgeting questions with people just obviously understanding the basics of budgeting, but not understanding how to implement it in a way that it maximizes their money.
And that's interesting that because I think we can Google things, right? We can look up how to make a budget. We can Google how much should be in our emergency fund. We can use AI for all of this stuff. But the missing piece is that you don't have the therapy. Like your co-host mentioned, there is an element of the therapy and understanding the person asking these questions and what they need. And the budgeting apps, credit monitoring, investment analysis, it's all available. Like it's all there. From what you are seeing and what you're hearing, are these tools useful or are they just more clever marketing to just get people's attention?
Mm. I personally do think some of the tools are useful, but I think the element that some people miss is not understanding themselves and how can I say it, their own financial habits and behaviors, right? So if I'm an impulse spender, I don't know, using certain budgeting apps may not be helpful for me. So I need to understand basically what my strengths and weaknesses are in my own personal finances to understand the tools that work best for me. So again, for example, if you're someone who needs to know where every dollar is going because you tend to overspend every month, then using a paying yourself first budgeting system probably is not going to be effective for you, right? So I think people need to learn where they are and what their needs are before they then go and look for tools to help.
I personally am scarred and mint.com, it doesn't exist anymore. And
I
I
know.
took some satisfaction in it because mint.com scarred me when it comes to budgets. When I got my first job and I'm making money and I was using this tool and it would, it would have you create all the categories and how much you spend. But then it would do this thing that like still makes me like shudder to this day. If we had $50 allocated to gas for the car and we spent 60, that meant next month I only had $40 to spend. And I'm like,
Mm-mm.
and I didn't realize it then, but it's like you're punishing me. I'm getting
Yeah.
punished. And then I'm digging myself deeper and deeper and deeper into these holes because if I allocated $50, I allocated it for a reason. That's what I spent.
Yeah.
I can't not go to work. That I can't. And that really, it clearly stuck with me because it's, 15 years later
Yeah.
that I'm still
Yeah.
talking about it. But that to me was a tool that just did not help me. And it was like almost like, forget it. I can never do money. I can never do budgets because I'm failing. And like the light was, it was like the font was red. It was angry at me. And to me, that was like everything that I hated about budgeting and financial tools. And it clearly just wasn't one that worked for me.
Yep, that's right. No, I completely can relate with that.
If you find you're nodding along so far, do me a favor. I'm going to take a quick ad break, but share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. It could be a friend, a coworker, a cousin. I don't care who. Just get the message out there so more of us can become financially empowered. I'll see you after the short break.
So I personally am someone who before had a scarcity mindset and just always had an anxiousness about not having enough money. So what has kind of helped me is not counting every penny. So I am absolutely a pay yourself first girl. I know what my incomings and outgoings are. And then I have some kind of freedom because what you just described sounds like, you feel limited, restricted, like you don't have enough, but it gives me the freedom to feel like, well, I've done all the things I need to do. I've saved, I've invested, I've paid my bills, and I can do what I want with the rest.
Yeah, and I like that strategy as well because we're not having a spreadsheet to track it, right? We're not line by line categorizing it. And I think that that strategy resonates with a lot of people because
Yeah.
there's only a small portion of the population that enjoys the spreadsheets, enjoys the line by line and feels empowered by it.
Yep.
But if by doing the pay yourself first, save, you're saving, your bills are getting paid, and then what's left over is for the fun stuff, that's very easy for someone to understand and to feel empowered by.
Exactly. And again, I think budgeting gets a bad rep, and sometimes it does, depending on your experience with it. But I think people should approach budgeting like going, I don't know, jean shopping. For me, I try on a bunch of different jeans before I buy one. So there's so many different budgeting systems out there. So try on the different budgeting systems, see what one works for you and what helps you to feel more empowered versus restricted.
Absolutely. So we're trying to all the new tools are coming out. AI is obviously at the center of everything, right? We don't, there's not much we don't use AI for. I mean, as far as meal planning goes or, organization or life hacks or whatever it is, we're using it. And are you seeing a lot of people use AI to help them manage their money, like their day-to-day spending or even their investments?
What's interesting is I would say in my personal life with people I know, no. So they're using it for things like you say, meal planning or coming up with strategies, helping with work. But I did come across an Experian report this year that found 60% of Gen Z population and 62% of millennials surveyed are using AI or generative AI to help with personal finances. So I think that's a significant number, and lots of people are actually using it for that reason.
Do you think it's, or is the report saying that it's replacing, like instead of Googling it, we're just going to AI? Or is it like we're using AI for the advice?
So the categories that people were using it for in the report were budgeting and saving, investment planning, and also improving their credit score. So doesn't say whether they're using it alongside a professional, such as a CFP or financial planner, but they are definitely using it for things like that.
Do you think AI can help with, you dove into finance for your own financial freedom, which obviously looks different for everyone. But how do you think AI is changing what financial freedom even looks like?
Well, I like that question. So, in terms of how it's changing what financial freedom looks like, I think one of the big things would be reclaiming your time. We live in a world where everyone is busy. We have 10 million things to do a day. And like I said, I decided to go into the personal finance space as a profession because I just wasn't making out the time during my free time, which I had little of, to do kind of research and learn about finances. So I think AI tools can be used to help you streamline that work of, going through your taxes, coming up with a financial strategy, budgeting even to see how you can optimize your money. Those are all areas where AI can help people save time so that they can get closer to the goal of achieving financial freedom. I also think that AI is helping to democratize knowledge. And I think this is a big one, especially for women who don't feel comfortable or don't feel confident in a male dominated financial world, as you said. said earlier, I think it can be like a private and non judgmental space for people to learn about finances and not feel intimidated. You can ask, for example, if you're using a chat bot like Google Gemini, you can ask it as many follow up questions as you want. You can ask it to explain it to you like a first grader. You can pop different scenarios in there, right? So I think in that sense, it helps, that knowledge become more accessible. And then what that does is it takes you closer again to your goal of achieving financial freedom. Because some people know they want to achieve financial freedom, but they just don't have any idea how to get there. And maybe they do have a high paying job, maybe they are earning good money, but they don't know what to do with it. And I think AI can help to fill that gap.
I think that that is so important. And I think that that's a great way to use AI when it comes to your finances. Because I'll speak to women all the time and they'll be like, I don't even know where to start. I don't understand any of it. But even more importantly, or the worst part is they don't feel comfortable asking questions because it's
Yes.
like, I should know this. Every question starts, I should know this, but, or this may be a dumb question, but, and it's not dumb, and no, you
No,
shouldn't have known it because no one
no.
ever taught it to you. How are you expecting yourself to know something that no one's ever taught to you? So using AI to just ask those questions, and guess what? You're not getting an attitude sent back to you. In fact, they're telling you how wonderful you are likely. But that's a great
Uh-huh.
question. You're not, getting like a you should have known that type of look. I often say one of the issues in financial services is that the person delivering the information, one is speaking at a much higher level than they should be.
Yes.
And is that to just show off how much they know? Maybe. We don't need to know how much you know. Like we know you know a lot, so just speak to us. And also financial people that in finance that speak, they expect everyone to like love the stock market. Wake up every day, what's the market doing? Or like know everything inside of what a Roth conversion is and like can't wait to do that. Like they just expect everyone to have the same passion around it as they do, and that's just not realistic.
It's not.
Yeah. So that using AI, I mean, and I give you so much credit because it's like you just dove into it. You're like, I have to learn to know how to do this stuff to survive. But you were able to take that info and make a career out of it. But it's just so intimidating for women. So I think using AI as a conversation to ask those questions you weren't comfortable asking is just amazing.
I love what you said about it being a conversation because I do think that's one of the strong points of AI, the fact that it is interactive. So you can go online, and I do believe in still alongside AI because you need to fact check what you're getting on there using articles and reputable sources. But the issue with an article is it's not interactive, right? So you finish reading, or even halfway, you're like, well, what's that? And then you go and have to research, over and over, which is not a bad thing, right? I think learning is an iterative process, but with AI, it's like a conversation. So, it might tell you, well, hey, you have some tax loss harvesting opportunities. And you're like, well, what's tax loss harvesting? And they can get into that and you keep going, right? Versus jumping between five different tabs to kind of grasp a topic.
Right, right, because so many times a abbreviation may be used like ETF, and no one explains, well, what is an ETF? So
Yes.
if someone's talking to you and they say ETF and you're like, I don't even know what that is, and then you miss everything after that they're saying because you're like, what is an ETF? And you're coming up with all these scenarios in your head and you don't feel comfortable enough to say, well, what is an ETF? And so nothing's getting implemented because you're stuck
Yeah.
here where you're stuck at point C when they're all the way at point N, and but nothing's going to get implemented. And I feel like so much, especially when it comes to finance, that if we aren't comfortable or understand everything along the way, especially the basic stuff, we
Yes.
then can't make big decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's so important if people are going to use AI because another thing that I see a lot of listeners who send us questions and issue they have, as I said earlier, is well, they have this lofty goal, but they don't know how to get there, right? And sometimes that keeps people from making any progress at all because it's like, well, I know I need to save, but they don't know how much they need to save, how much they can afford to save, how much they're spending, and then they just don't do anything at all. So AI can also be like a thought partner or a tool that's used to break down these lofty goals into smaller steps so that you can make progress and start with one small thing. whether that is cutting back on what you're spending or automating your savings and putting $50 into a high yield savings account. Whatever it is, I think it can be a good thing to get people started who are kind of feeling stuck.
Do you think that there's a line where it's like, okay, AI, let's get you to a place where you're confident and comfortable, and then it can only take you so far? Like that's when you need to start working with a professional or getting outside resources. Or is there too much of a dependence on AI to like guide them through most of their financial decisions?
I think there is that risk. And, I came across, I think it was a newsletter or an article the other day that, said people are romantically involved with AI these days. Some people say their AI chatbot is their best friend. And, I think it's great that people have someone to talk to and interact with in that way, but you cannot get the human connection and personalization that you get from a financial advisor or a finance professional from AI. And yeah, they may cheer you on and say you're doing great and kind of give you that encouragement, but it's still a chatbot. You know what I mean? So, as we were saying earlier, I think the real value of a financial advisor or a finance professional is they get to see or learn about you in real time. They get to understand what your values are, what your money fears are, what your financial triggers are, if you are prone to, I don't know, penny pinching and all these other things that actually majorly impact your finances. So I think it's just a good practice for people to use AI as a jumping off point, but not to use it as a destination.
As a content creator yourself, do you think AI is going to reshape the personal finance education space? Will we see fewer human experts? Or does it create more opportunities because we can gather resources even faster to give it to the public?
I love that. And there's a lot of fear around that, I think, because in addition to doing finance content, I also write for other magazines and publications. And there's just that fear amongst other writers that is AI going to replace us? But I think even what I said still translates to other forms of media that people still want human connection. This is just like my bird's eye point of view, but I see in a lot of comment sections people getting annoyed when they see responses that even look like AI or articles that look like they were written by AI. I don't think people really like that because there's still a mistrust there. One, and two, people still want a human connection. We thrive off of that. So, with that said, I do think that AI can be used as a thought partner within our spaces. It can help us to, we sometimes come across a lot of information and databases, and it can help us to kind of crunch those numbers and that information into more digestible things that we can then use add our expertise and our personality and our real life experiences and our personal knowledge too. So I think we can work together to create, I guess, a more efficient landscape for people who need to consume personal finance knowledge.
I agree. And I think too, like in any industry or whatever your job is, you can use AI to do the things that like your brain just is not your genius in your scope of genius, right? So
Yes.
like use AI for that or help them get you 75% of the way there, right? But then that just frees up your brain to work in your scope of genius. So then you become even better and stronger in what you're really good at.
Yes. And a thing that I notice as well is no matter how much you love your job, well, depending on what you do, what your job is, burnout is always around the corner, right? Because, like you said, you're doing those repetitive and time consuming tasks that don't necessarily light you up and, don't necessarily pour into your creativity. So I think AI can help you take on those tasks, right? So you can focus on doing things that you love, which is an important part of producing, I think, good work. So
Being that we're both podcasters, I'm always looking for new podcasts to listen to, just, to get different perspectives and best practices and all of that. And I found this one podcast and I cannot remember what it was now, what the topic was, but I'm like, oh, like based on the title, I'm like, oh, I'm interested in that. And I go and look at it and it like has like like hundreds of 1-star reviews. And I'm like, this is interesting. And so I start to read the reviews, and it turns out it was a completely AI podcast. And
no.
and some of the comments were like, I thought the voice was a little monotone, but I kept listening and then I realized it was completely AI. Or like other people were like, I noticed it right away. And they felt deceived because it's presented as just a regular podcast. And then they start listening to it and it's like, and obviously it's not, it's completely a robot. And so you're right in that people still want a human element to it. And so I heard another podcast that I listened to, like, AI is gonna be able to duplicate our voices and put in,
Yes.
create podcasts in my voice, and he was kind of freaking out about it, but it's like, we still know at the end, like, we're humans at the end of the day, we can sift through it, we can figure it out. So it's like, yeah, is the threat there? Like, everything's a, threat at some point, but just knowing at the end of the day, people still want people. They still want their personalities, their viewpoints to learn from and speak to.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to do less work, or should I say more efficient work, or streamline their work, but nobody wants to live in a world full of robots, you know? And while that seems like the threat, I don't think that's something anyone wants. Hopefully, we would rebel if that's the direction the world was going in. So, hopefully, content will not be replaced by AI. And I don't think that would be good for anyone.
Yeah. So how often do you find when you're in your circle of friends or when you're not wearing your podcaster hat or writing hat, financial expert hat, do you talk money with your friends? Does it come up? Do your friends ask you questions, or is it still something of, I still don't understand what you do, Elizabeth, and I'm not ever going to?
I'm the annoying friend, and I have been in finance for a while now. So people do ask me questions. I do have friends who come and go like, "Well, how do I open a RIA?" I actually had someone message me on Instagram the other day and say, "I put money inside of my IRA, and it's been there for 3 years and it hasn't grown much." And I'm like, well, did you invest the money inside the IRA? She didn't, right? So again, these are things where people feel silly to ask, or like, I should know that. Why would you know that, right? But these are such small things that can have a major impact on your financial progress. So I do have people ask me questions. I love to answer the questions. And I also am the annoying friend, as I said, or family member, because I'm like, well, do you have an estate plan? And are you saving enough for retirement? And do you have an emergency saving fund? And how can we maximize that income? So because so many people maybe are not taking the steps that they need to in order to create financial stability or freedom for themselves because they don't have that knowledge or have those knowledge gaps, I love to share it. So, yeah.
What is the reception when you're the annoying friend or family member and you start asking these questions?
Well, I do it playfully because I am playful, so there's no shame, no judgment. But I just want them to start thinking about it and also realize, like we said earlier, it doesn't have to be complicated. So usually people receive it well from me, or my sister. I probably bother her the most. She gets a little annoyed and she's like, "Well, I'm not earning enough to do that right now," and I'm like, "Okay, I get it, but just keep it in mind, or just start with $2, anything."
What about your son? Do you speak to your son about money? And how is that conversation with him in your house different than how you grew up talking about money?
Love this question. So I grew up in a household where my parents didn't really talk about money except the lack of it. And we grew up in, I guess, a working class home. Growing up, I never struggled or didn't have anything. But my mom worked a lot. She worked a lot, and it was always like, well, this is expensive and that's expensive. So there kind of was a lot of anxiousness, I guess, for her around money. And I think that definitely translated to me when I was older. But there was no financial education. And interestingly, my mom retired early. She invested a lot, but she never told me anything about all those things that she did. So there just wasn't that transparent conversation about money. Now, with my son, he is 7, and we talk about money all the time. I've already started telling him he has this little piggyback money about like saving and investing. Whenever he was younger and he would get birthday money, I would put it inside of an account for him, a savings account. And I still do if he gets any money. And just the other day, when I was walking him home from school yesterday, he goes, "Mom, how was your day?" And I'm like, I had to work and I was doing this and that. He's like, "How much money did you make today?" So he's always asking me about how much money I have when we're in the store. He doesn't need to know how much money I have. So I tell him I have $70. And then he'll go, "Well, that's $80. So you don't have enough money for that." So we have lots of conversations about money. I think the biggest thing for me is trying to strike a balance to not have him be anxious about money. So I try not to transfer that lack, like that idea of lack. So I make him know I have enough money, we're okay, but I still have to save so I can keep the money, right? And also money should be enjoyed because he's going a bit on the extreme penny pinching end because he doesn't want to not have any more of the $70 in his piggy bank. So he doesn't want to spend it.
I get nervous that I talk to my kids too much about money, that I'm then making it too much of a focus in their lives or being almost too aware of it because I'm doing the same thing. I'm talking about money. Mommy works to make money. I let them make their choices about money. Do you want to use your money for this? Or mommy's choosing not to spend her money on this toy you want right now because you have a playroom full of toys you don't need anymore. But if you want to spend your money, so I have conversations like that. But it's so funny how, like, children, they don't have any concept of how much is what. So you tell your son, "I have $70." And so they will ask questions, and it's just like, I don't know, it's so hard to answer it without one, because you could say whatever number you wanted. They don't understand what it means, but you don't wanna make them feel like a lack or like, "How much
Yes.
money do you have?" "Well, in my wallet, technically, I have nothing because it's just my credit cards in there." So it's like,
Yeah.
"Okay, you don't have money for that." And it's like, "Well, I do," but so it is, and I do struggle with that as someone who talks about money all day, every
Yeah.
day, of how much is too much. But I think it is important to understand, like, maybe where you're already identifying your son's leaning a little bit more towards the pinching, which could also just be his money personality. Like, he
True.
could have just leaned that way anyway. So it is a very fine balance, I think, because we talk about it all the time, that it's like, oh my gosh, am I now talking about this too much with my
Yeah.
children?
Yeah. And I think language matters too, like you said, how you talk about it, because I try not to say, well, I don't have it, right? Because, most of the time, technically I do. But so I just try to focus more on wants versus needs, actually. I think that's where we're focusing on a lot right now. So, I might have it, but I don't want to spend it on that because I want to be able to spend this allocated money on something else later. So we're in Ross or Marshalls and he wants something. And it's like, well, we don't always have to buy something we want. And I tell him the 10 things that I want to buy too that I'm choosing not to buy, right? Because I want to save or because I want us to go out to eat tomorrow or whatever it is. So, yeah.
I think what's important is that we're showing them, or for listeners with talking about money with their children, is that you're showing that there's a thought process to it. We're thinking
Yes.
about it. We're making decisions, a want versus a need, or I'm choosing not to spend my money on that right now. So just showing that you have control over it versus it having control over you. And I think, like, when you boil it down, that feeling is what makes people don't like money or like talking about it, is because they don't feel like they have any control over it.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, but you do, and I think people don't realize how much control they have over it, especially for people who feel like, well, again, I'm not earning enough or I just have too many bills. There's always something within your control, within your budget. You just have to take the time to sit with it and remember that money is a relationship. I think lots of people just have lots of shame around it as well, because again, I think when you look at maybe your credit card statement or your debit card statement for the month, it mirrors your behaviors, and some people don't wanna look at that, right? But you just have to remember there doesn't need to be shame around it, and it's a relationship, and you can always pivot, so
Money's very forgiving, right?
yes.
You can pick up today and start anew, and it's not mad at you, and you
Nope.
can now build a completely new relationship with it. It doesn't hold
Yeah.
grudges. It is
No.
like AI in that it's loves you.
Yeah, yeah. Love that analogy, exactly.
Yeah. So you've been ahead of the curve when it comes to writing about money long before AI entered the picture. But for someone who's listening, as we're wrapping up, who wants to stay financially empowered in this fast changing world, because it is always changing, what's one mindset or practice you think will never go out of style, no matter how much technology evolves?
Let me think. I think I'm gonna offer 2 if you don't mind, but I think the first one is just knowing. I think the fundamentals of everything is just knowing where your money is going without judgment. Pay attention to where your money is going, because it tells a story about what your values are, what's important to you, and then if you have somewhere you're trying to go, you also get information about maybe what's getting in the way of you getting there, right? So I started a practice because I used to have a lot of shame around looking at what my spending was, because it's like, well, I did damage this week. Other weeks I do better. But now I have a practice of not being avoidant, and I look at what I spend every single week and I don't judge. It just gives me information to pivot. I know what my current goals are, and that's to, get my emergency fund to 6 months. I'm trying to double the amount that I save for my retirement savings this year, up the amount that I put in my son's 529 account. I have a clear idea of how much I need to put into each of these buckets in order to achieve that goal. So, looking at my finances every single week gives me the opportunity to make sure that I'm on track to achieving that goal. So, I would say whether you're using AI, a budgeting app, whatever it is, and that's another thing. Don't heavily rely too much on these technologies. I think it's always going to be a good practice, again, to look yourself at what you're spending and emotionally connect to where your finances are. And then I would say the second one is just constantly evaluating your relationship with money. When I say that, I think an even bigger thing to do is just dream, right? Because I think some people find finances daunting because they feel overwhelming or maybe they're in kind of a lack mindset. But like you just said, money is forgiving. It's also very malleable and it can get you to wherever you need to get to. Sometimes I know there are lots of barriers if you have a strategy for how to get there. I think one of the biggest things that helped me to pivot was dreaming of what the possibilities were. What do I want retirement to look like? Well, what could it be, right? Could I retire early? And what would I like to do with my free time? And, what could I do with this money? How could I enhance my life and the life of the people around me? I think that kind of gave me the energy to do the harder things when it came to money because I had a vision for my money. So I would say that people, AI, I don't think can do that. It can't build your own vision of your finances, of how you want your life to look like for you. But that's something that you can do within yourself. And AI can just help you to get there, or technology.
All right, Elizabeth, it's time for our money confession segment where I ask you some real deal questions about your money and you just answer as openly and as honestly as you can.
All right.
If money were to show up at your doorstep, what would you say to it?
Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
What's a recurring expense you have that you love, even if others might call it ridiculous?
Kava. Is it Kava or Kava? I probably
I
order
call it
from there.
kava.
Kava. I order from there every single week, sometimes twice a week.
If you were gifted $1,000 and you had to spend it today, no saving, no investing, what would you do with it?
Travel. I'd go somewhere.
What's your most rebellious money move? Something a financial expert might cringe at, but you do it again in a heartbeat.
Oh, that a financial expert would cringe at. I don't know if this is a good one, but I know I'm a fire advocate and I know some financial experts think it's unrealistic, but I save probably around 40%, almost 50% of my incomes. Some people might argue that that's a little too much and restricts, how much I can use in real life, but I like it. It's going to get me closer to my early retirement goal. So,
Can you just expand a little bit on what the FIRE movement is for our listeners?
yeah. So, FIRE is financial independence, retire early. If you are curious, Reddit has a whole section of FIRE followers, and you can kind of poke around in there. But I do want to also say there are different types of FIRE. So, the whole idea is just for you to save and strategize in a way that you can retire early. And early looks different for everyone. For some people, it could be 60, 50, 40, whatever it is. And what I like about FIRE are there are different types of FIRE. So some people plan to live minimally in retirement. So they save aggressively. For other people, FIRE is not necessarily about retiring and not working at all. They just want to be able to maybe pursue work they want and have enough money maybe to take a pay cut to pursue that work.
And what's your favorite cheap thrill? Something under $20 that brings you joy every time?
Going to a garden. I love gardens. I love butterflies. I'm very kind of whimsical in that way. So I just like to go to a nature reserve, and usually that's free.
I love what Elizabeth said, that money tells a story about what we value and where we want to go. And here's the truth. You can start rewriting that story anytime you decide to start paying attention. If this conversation got you thinking about your own money habits, or maybe how AI and automation fit into your financial world, don't let it stop here. That curiosity, that's where real change starts. Every week, I share deeper insights, resources, and conversations that help you actually apply what you hear on the show. Because knowing is great, but doing is better. So go subscribe to the Talking Points newsletter at everyone'stalkingmoneypodcast.com. Follow the show on your favorite app and come hang out with me on Instagram at Everyone's Talking Money. Remember, money isn't just numbers, it's a relationship. And like any good one, it only gets stronger when you start showing up for it.